I want everything that those deer want
to be
in this corridor.
Optimal.
Yes, that's
so
max.
you do it along the edges of the corridor.
Well, actually, what I'm doing is both, right? So, like on this Roundup Ready alfalfa, I take my four-wheeler, I put my fogger, my backpack leaf blower fogger with a tank on it, on the back of it. I go to the ditch down here and get me a gallon of water, right? I put a gallon of water, half a gallon of Roundup, I put my sticker in it, and then I put an acre of liquid fertilizer in it. And so whichever I'm using, if I'm using the high, I don't put the calcium in with the Roundup, but I'll put the nitrogen or I'll do the clover.
That'll chelate the glyphosate?
So I'm not positive, but calcium is a tricky one. I have mixed calcium with 3 different things in the past and end up with a ball of calcium about this big around in your tank and all the way through your hoses.
It's chelating out the salt of the glyphosate.
It's grabbing it, right? Somehow. And so phosphorus and calcium never go together. Instantly, you're going to have a tank full of yogurt is what it's going to look like. And about half the guys throw the whole sprayer away because if you don't keep water in it, it turns hard in there and you can't get it out, right? Especially when you have a regular nozzle. See, I don't have a nozzle. I'm doing what they call venturi. Right. And so the chemical or the whatever I'm using, it just drops out without a nozzle, no pressure behind it, and then the air catches it and shoves it out, right? And so that's how I can get dirty water out of a ditch. And some people say, oh, that dirty water is going to mess up the, the power of your Roundup. Well, I'm using a 20% solution, and most people are using, what, a 2 or a 3% solution. And so if I lose and I go down to a 17% solution, I'm fine with that.
So when you're doing that, so you're walking along this...
No, I'm driving at 3 miles an hour.
Okay, and you're spraying off to the side.
No, well, so depending on what I'm working with here, right? If I'm just wanting to push an edge back, right? Then I'll spray off to the side. But on that fogger I got it.
So you're getting this.
Yeah.
When it's got weeds and stuff.
Yeah.
Before you plant. Okay.
Or even after I come back next year, these weeds are going to come up in here like crazy. And the reason they are was our sun, right? And then the nitrogen coming off the alfalfa.
So you're blowing it behind you so it doesn't blow in your face.
Yeah, as I'm driving
through here.
Yeah, I'll drive 4 miles an hour through this, and when I run out, I got a rack on the front. I'll grab another jug of water and just go through the whole same process again, right? So when I take off, I can do 3 or 4 acres, or I can stop anywhere out here, grab a little bit of water, and continue with it, right? And so all the naysayers, I've heard all the stuff, you don't need more than this, you don't need that, you don't need this. Well, I know all this works because I've done it thousands of times, right?
The other thing I've seen you do is do a hinge cut bedding area. We were at Jake Ehlinger's place, I think, and you hinge cut an area of an acre or so, and then went through with that steel fogger and put herbicide down, and then followed by walking through and putting seed down in right there in their bedding area, so the fawns and everybody has something to feed on. So what mix are you using for that? I mean,
same mix.
So you're going to kill everything off and let it regenerate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same exact mix. Now we're standing here. We just come off that stand site. And so you see the bee on the tree?
I saw it.
Yeah, that's the bedding area, right? And look at my stand site, right?
Yeah.
But that's, when I come in here to hinge cut this winter, I didn't design this for a bedding area. But like I had mentioned to you up here at the front, those deer are coming across the road from that neighbor's property.
Yeah.
And so I had never planned on hunting in here.
I've seen this phenomenon before, and what can happen is they're in a heavy cover property like this, and it's getting to be daylight, maybe, and they don't want to expose themselves, so this is where they lay down and they wait it out. Because they have a nice spot here. In the evening, they'll continue
and feel safe enough. They get up in the daylight and eat around in there, plenty of food. And so, this would be, I consider just a morning stand. Yeah. And a good morning stand's hard to find on property typically, right? Because you don't know where they're at out there.
Yeah.
And you're walking in, and most of the time, you're busting deer when you're walking in the dark.
Yeah.
And so this is up at the front edge We got our food that way, travel corridor coming to the neighbors. We'll see how it ends up. But again, that bedding, I don't expect them to be in here till 8:30, right?
Mhm.
So I come in just at daylight, making sure I'm not breaking sticks and taking my time. And I slide into my stand. I'm not the guy that's stomping my way all the way into it and all that. And think I can, like an afternoon hunt, I hunt my way to my stand. I go from one tree to the next.
Mhm.
I'll walk in, I'll stand by this tree and stand here 2 or 3 minutes, right? And then I'll walk to the next tree. And I'm not doing this. I'm just walking and watching my feet,
Yeah.
But the sticks are what I'm worried about making the most noise. But yeah, I just go from tree to tree when I'm coming in. I've shot a lot of deer doing that.
I've had the same kind of observation where I like to be slipping in just as daybreak is coming. And I'm maybe not as cautious as you're saying there, but I've groomed my trail, so I'm trying to be quiet coming in and keeping attention to see if I did spook a deer. But right at the edge of daylight is the time when I'm least likely to see a deer on that pathway.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
There's something about right at daylight, right before daylight is where stuff's starting to liven up in the woods. You start hearing the birds starting to carry on a little bit, and the squirrels are starting to make some noise. But a half hour before daylight, there's almost no noise in the woods.
There's a famous hunter, and I can't remember his name right now. He's like a bookmark to Rick Rampola, that kind of level of trophy hunter, and I can't remember his name. He's an old timer. He's older than I am, I think. He's a friend of mine on Facebook, but I can't grab his name right now. But he always, all of his buddies would leave the cabin and go out before dark, and he would wait till daylight so he could see what was happening as he's getting to his stand. And I think he probably understood this concept that very few hunters do, that they're not in their beds at that time.
Yeah.
And they're starting to make their way to safe areas. So if you choose your pathway correctly, you're probably not going to run into them. And he knew that. And he would stalk his way to his stand and kill big bucks while his buddies were back playing poker in the cabin.
So I had a real quick story here.
I got to come up with his name.
Had a guy
in the description.
Had a guy in Kansas. His neighbor was an outfitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the outfitter would let my buddy come down and stay at his place and then hunt his own place, right? And so they'd have 10 or 11 guys show up at the outfitter's place every year to hunt, right? Well, this guy would go down, his name's Corey, he'd show up with a bunch of alcohol. Whole trunk full of alcohol, right?
He's hunting the hunters, right?
He'd pass it all out, and they'd sit around talking. He'd keep them up late drinking, right? Keep them fired up. I say 1 o'clock, everybody would crash out or whatever, 2 o'clock. Well, he'd sleep in. He'd let that outfitter take them all out to their stands, right? Well, he had an 80-acre piece. He'd show up about 11 o'clock, right? Mm-hmm. After they drove all the deer into his little 80 acres, right? 2 years in a row, he killed 190s, and they thought that he was the man for sure, and they didn't realize they were the deer drivers for him, right?
Yeah.
And so he just let them do their thing. They were stinking like alcohol out there probably, and he sits at the gate till about noon, and then he slides in there and gets
I call that hunting the hunter, and I've got a friend, Scott Homrich, who hunts the hunters. He hunts on a property that's got like 350 acres, and there are probably 20 guys that hunt it. He hunts the hunters. They have a logbook, and they have to say where they're going to go that day. He looks at where everybody was yesterday. He finds a vacant spot where they push the deer into that he knows is a good spot, and that's where he hunts. And he's got the biggest bucks in the book year after year after year.
Hunt the hunt.
Scott Homrich.
Very cool.
So this
I had to tell that story twice because
that's a good one.
We didn't get it on video before. And it's really so important for guys that are hunting with buddies and lease partners and stuff like that. If you're not hunting them, you're not hunting properly.
Yep.
Especially if they're a little bit sloppy. That's a really good thing for you.
All right.
Yeah.
Public land, it's perfect. So you can see here, I spilled my seed, right? Can you tell?
A little thick.
Comment on when we went around the corner. I do that every year.
I know, right?
But actually, it grows pretty good for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder how densely you could grow rye without. Are you using a rootstock rye? Or just
Nah,
your
just
local
whatever
grain?
I come up with. Yeah.
I bought 2 bags of your rootstock this year.
Did you get it from Jake?
Huh?
Did you get it from Jake?
Yeah, Jake brought some back. Actually, our friend Curry Wood up in Hillman gets a bunch of it every year. And,
Oh, does he? Okay.
and people drive up there and bring back loads. So,
So
Jake
tell
got
me
it.
more about it. I don't.
A rootstock rye is named after a town in Maine called Aroostock. Funny enough. And what they did is develop a strain of rye that grows very well through the winter.
Oh.
It grows at cooler temperatures and at a higher rate, apparently, than other kinds of rye. This is my first year using it, but I've been following my buddies using it for years, and they swear by it, especially the guys up there in northern Michigan.
So they've hybridized a lot of different plants like that, like crimson clover.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of different varieties of crimson clover designed specifically, you know, one's for nitrogen production, the next one's for hay production or whatever. You know, I bought some that's real tall crimson, and I bought some that's just a little bitty short thing, you know. But anyways.
Do you have any pictures or videos of how you set up your four-wheeler to do that spraying?
No, but I have the four-wheeler up here because it broke down and it's still sitting out here in the woods. And so we can kind of talk about
Okay, can we get
up
there?
here. I don't think I got my fogger on it, but I got a real neat deal that this guy invented, and it's 2 C-shaped rails that's welded onto the rack, and then all my equipment, we put a plastic plate on the bottom of PVC, and you just slide it in there. See, it takes me about 2 seconds to change up my equipment, right? Instead of all the C-shaped.
So while we're right here at this beach log, I want to ask you your opinion about something, because you talked a little bit about leaf litter on the trail there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that struggle with the idea of cutting a tree down and leaving it lay on the forest floor.
Yeah.
So I've thought about this a lot and thought about all the ways that's not even hardly a pallet log.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't like beech trees very much.
Well, they left it here for that reason. They cut it and drove it to this spot.
Right, yeah. Maybe he won't notice or something.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But there's a lot of trees that are only good for pallet wood, and I think they're worth more to drop them on the ground than to skid them out and get a piddling a little amount of money for them. And I bet you can guess some of the reasons why I think that.
Well, so I'm almost positive you're right in most areas, no matter what, because again, you can't get rid of them and to leave them stand for another 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
You know, the loggers don't want them. Even if they have good trees on this property, they don't want that one because they can go down the road and get another good tree. You know, that one, if they take it out, they might get $25. The next one they take out, they get $125. It's the same exact amount of work, right? And so, yeah.
Or if it's a veneer log, they could get $1,000.
Right, but they're not. They didn't take it, right? So, do I want that beech tree standing on my property the whole entire time I have it? No. So I'm not upset that they cut that one down and left it lay here, right?
It's kind of a philosophical problem with a lot of people, because they say to me, well, it's not right to waste the log, but I don't think you're wasting it, because that one right there is creating moisture underneath it.
Well, there's no doubt.
Which increases bacterial activity, brings in grubs and bugs. It'll decay and release a lot of potash over time. So there's real value to just leaving the debris on the forest floor.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's going to go right back into compost and go right back into our soil. The timber's dominated with fungus and not as much bacteria. The open fields are more bacteria and less fungus. Well, that's fungus food.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we're going to have a healthier environment. And then that fungus, you know, it really does take nutrients out of that, transfer it through the ground to other plants, and then that fungus feeds them, and then that plant puts out a sap or a juice that feeds that fungus too. And so, you know,
and so this log too, as it decays, it's going to create a home for millions of bugs. And
there's your fungus growing in it right now. You know, I rolled it over. This was the bottom,
all that these black.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's getting up in there now.
And stuff here.
You can see how fast it's going, and
Yeah.
that stuff helps it go, you know.
And now you're going to get birds coming in here feeding off of this log, and
and all the
pooping on
insects,
ground,
yeah,
and
and when the birds come in for
they
the
poop out seeds.
yeah, and I get diversity come in. I mean,
it's just wonderful to watch this thing decaying and adding potash back to the soil.
well, and micronutrients that
Yeah.
it needs to survive, that these other trees are going to need from it to
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah.
Over in Europe, they went in and cut down beech trees and planted spruce trees in plantations. Then they done some study and they realized, wait a second, when we put spruce trees beside beech trees, they grow better and faster. And so they done a radioactive isotope, and they put it in, and then they picked it up in these. So they started calling the beech tree the mother tree that would take care of the other ones of other species around it, you know.
Feeding it with nutrients through the fungi.
Exactly, right. And so there is people that have figured a lot of this stuff out, but, you know, nobody's interested to learn it except for a few, right? And pass that information
if you were
around.
to remove everything in here except the fungi, you'd probably be able to see it if you shined a light on it.
Right.
I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It permeates the soil and the decaying materials everywhere. In every little milliliter of soil.
Yeah. Well, they say, you know, a tablespoon of bacteria and the fungus in it, I mean, the spores are millions, you know, in a tablespoon.
I've become interested in that. I've seen a few TED videos and stuff on
the thing about,
fungi.
so you see, I rode that over the dozer to push it back the other day, and anything that you turn or roll in a compost type of scenario, it's going to deteriorate way faster. And so that log on top, that fungus hadn't started eating the bark off it. That's like a shield up there, and no moisture's getting in. You roll that thing over, now the moisture's soaking
right through the wood. Yeah.
And so deterioration, way faster, right? That's only been 4 years. So after they got done logging, I went around here, there's 40 to 50 entire trees laying like that they bucked, limbed, and drugged to spots, right? And I just like, and then they talk about not making enough money or whatever, and it's like, yeah.
Well, it costs some money to haul it.
Well, but it costs some money to cut it and drag it to here.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of beech trees laying around for the same reason. But I've got them like 4 feet in diameter.
Do yours up there hollow out real fast?
Yes. Yeah, most of the big beech trees hollow out. The other phenomenon we saw is that when we removed, especially up on high ground about 20 feet off the creek bottom, we have a plateau of several acres, and 2 or 3 acres. And there were big beech trees on it. We removed all the big trees, except there's this one beautiful beech tree standing in the center of it, and a couple of beech trees kind of on the edge of it. And the logger and I made a big deal out of memorializing the cut that we had done over the last several months, and we rode into that tree. And I come back after deer season, and it's laying on its side because we had removed all of its protection from the wind. Well, and then we lost 2 other of those big beech trees like that.
And that's what happened to this property as soon as they got done cutting. It happens to every property. As soon as they log it hard, especially to 16-inch breast height, you get a lot of that wind damage, right? Yeah. And so if you don't get out there and keep a maintenance going,
it's likely that tree survived in that location because of the wind protection that was getting downstream.
And I've done the same deal in a bedding area. Went in and cut it really hard and come back and have a lot of wind damage the next year, right?
Especially it'll blow over the dead ash trees and stuff like that you haven't touched. Yeah.
This is kind of interesting. I just noticed that the one that's facing the west, don't have anything growing on it. This is the second one we've went down. The one that's facing the east, the hillside, are covered with vegetation as we're walking up this.
These are getting browsed on Modiflora rose. It's amazing how much they love this plant.
I usually don't kill any of them out until I start getting them thick enough that I feel like they're starting to be a problem. You know.
Yeah, and that's the way. I mean, I think that's the way it should be managed. Same with autumn olives, I think, is if you have an autumn olive problem, it's you that caused it because you didn't get back to them soon enough.
Yeah.
And the same with multiflora rose, and the same with dandelions in your lawn, right?
Yeah.
It's not the dandelion's fault. It's your fault for not managing it.
If that's what you want.
These things can be managed.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But it takes work.
DNR paid people to plant them back in the day because they knew they were so good for wildlife, right?
They did multiflora rose?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew they did with autumn olive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how I manage them is after I get my walls of cover thick and they start getting real thick, then I start taking my invasives out of that wall cover so they can get their access back to it.
And that's the way it should be done, is gradual replacement.
And then as I replace, there's not enough sun for that one to come back real well from that root source. Or the seed source, underneath it.
That is absolutely the best strategy, I think. And I've seen so many times that people come in, they get a new property, and they cut a whole field of autumn olives down, and now they don't have any deer habitat for 2, 3, 4 years.
Anyways,
you can slowly evolve that. And by the way, you're not going to get rid of autumn olives or multiflora rose anyway. They're endemic.
Or bush honeysuckle.
Right.
Or vine honeysuckle.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of them, right?
Yeah, you have to live with them.
And so I've had guys say, I want you to eradicate it.
Yeah.
Right? And what I tell you is, and I got some properties that I'm doing it for them because that's what they want, right? And I explain my position on it, just like what you're saying there, right? We're taking all the cover out.
Yeah.
The problem with cutting this here bush isn't the sprouts off of the root system. It's the 10,000 seeds laying there waiting to take off. And so if I come into this property right off the bat and these plants have had enough sunlight to grow in here and I cut that thing down,
outrace the other one.
in 4 to 5 years, what I have is way worse problem than I ever had before.
When this grows up with brush like that, now you can cut that and it won't come back.
No, I ain't gonna have I ain't gonna have 50 seeds come up out there.
Yeah, really important.
It took me a long time. People say, oh yeah. I said, no, you manage the seed source is what you gotta manage. Don't worry about the top. The top's easy. That's 1/10 of it.
Yeah.
Just another spot here where they shove the logs in so they get through this deep ditch.
Yeah, they did that on my place too. Where do you get the Roundup Ready alfalfa? Do they sell it to food plotters, or do you have to go to an egg?
Well, I was having trouble getting it, and so then I was getting it through Cisco. I signed the contract, getting it through Cisco, and then I had a guy over, a local guy here. I said, hey, I'll get you as many bags as you want, And
a farmer?
Yes. And so then I started getting it through him, but I didn't know it. That big blow up in Minnesota, he got a hold of it because I had mentioned Roundup Ready alfalfa to him, and in sandy soils, that won't hurt to grow anything else. With my liquid fertilizer, as long as I get the root going on the alfalfa, that root goes down so deep in sandy soils, it finds its moisture.
Yeah.
It's the best thing in poor sandy soils that I've come up with because, again, it's like a hydroponic system. I just keep hitting it with what it needs until it gets going. And then after it's going, it's taking care of itself. And that alfalfa, last year up there in Minnesota, serious drought. The only thing I really had was the alfalfa doing it.
I think it's interesting. Alfalfa is a fascinating plant. I bought a property in Hillsdale County, Michigan, back around 2007, and it had been in CRP for about 10 or 12 years, and so it had all the high prairie grasses and stuff. And after it came, or parts of it that had come out of the program, I went out there and I just mowed, and I got almost pure alfalfa growth coming up that had sat there dormant all those years.
No, it isn't.
And it's also the story that you were talking about with the multiflora rose. Is at some point those new seeds got high enough so that the alfalfa couldn't grow anymore. As soon as you cut them away and give them some light, the alfalfa jumps up.
Yeah. On this Roundup Ready, another thing I've noticed is if I spray and it don't come in thick, as long as I keep my routine, every 3 to 4 weeks, I keep spraying with liquid fertilizer and Roundup. Some of those seeds didn't have the right environment, but because I keep their competition back, then they go ahead and sprout off a month, 5, 6 weeks later, and thicken up the plot, right? And so I went back 3 weeks later, but I got nothing. And I just hit it again, and then it comes.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
You got some kind of there.
That
The other side, yeah.
That alfalfa is that good. So the stand that I shot the 171 in, it's on that last ridge and out to the property line. I didn't even think about taking you over and showing it to you because it's not impressive spot, right?
Okay.
And we can walk over, but it's not a spot you'd be like, oh, I see why you shot a 170 here, right?
Yeah.
What it is a pinch situation for the neighbor's open hay field out there. And it was his corridor to come into me, and then that one ridge goes straight down to that hub down there toward the front of the property, right? And so I'm not for sure, obviously, where he was headed to, but he come from deep in me to that edge over there. But yeah, it's not one of those that I think that you guys would say, oh yeah, I need one just like this, right? So you can see I've left a few little limbs sticking out. They want to use them for licking branches. As you had said back there in some of these shady areas, we got more growth than we had out in the full sun. And again, it's my method of throwing it on top of the ground.
But there'll come a point where the ones that are in the sun will catch up, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just germination and growth off the food that's in the seed, mainly.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So I'd mentioned to you earlier, we was talking about the different fertilizers. Well, there was a guy who sent me this chicken manure, freeze-dried chicken manure compost deal. And he was saying that this material he has is a great seed starter because it has a whole lot of the micronutrients in it. And seed needs heavy metals to sprout. And so a lot of these coats, you got zinc in it, you know, and then the boron. There's different things in it that's a heavy metal that helps. So he was saying on that chicken manure, it's one of the best things. 200 pounds an acre as a seed starter when you put your seed down.
And where do you get that? Is it commercially available?
Yes, it is. I don't know the name of the company right this minute. I should have.
Well,
I talked to the guy for
if you can send it to me, I'll just put it on the video.
I talked to the guy for 2.5 hours, and he's one of the most interesting guys I've talked to for a couple of years with his knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Washington State. He's done a bunch of research and figured out that they need to open a plant in Wisconsin to do the same thing because of the number of chickens that they have there. But he's saying
sold in 50-pound bags.
yes, and he said 3 times more nutrients than regular composted chicken manure because of their processing, patented processing, and then with the freeze dry, and it's laid on top. He said it takes a long time for the moisture to break it down and get it back in the soil. So it's a time release situation because of the freeze drying on it.